everyone start watching Cloney on HBO Max. We can save him!
Oh man. I just knocked over my camera! I'm picking it up. Sorry about that.
Hi my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. So, today's video is pretty self-explanatory. It is no secret that I am a huge fan of Clone High. So back in July, you know I had to share my thoughts through a tier list. However, if you watched that video, or hell, even if you've watched that season of Clone High, chances are you had your fair share of criticisms. Most people did, just like me in that video. For reference, I've rewatched season 3 about 3 or 4 times, give or take, some in preparation for this video, some not. And I haven't touched season 2 since watching it back in June for my initial first watch. But we did know season 3 was coming. This wasn't some shocker. It was a 2-season deal back when the show was renewed. And sure enough, it was announced back in January that the full season would be dropping on February 1st. Which was shocking news because I wasn't expecting it that soon, but also shocking because the layout of the last release was basically we'd get 2 episodes every week. And I won't lie to you, at first my only motivation to watch this new season, besides Cleopatra, was purely for Skunky Poo. But as soon as this season started, I was met with a very pleasant surprise. I loved it! Genuinely, if you hated last season, I would very much urge you to give it a second chance because it was very much worth it. My ranking of the seasons goes the original obviously on top, then season 3, then season 2. To give you a visual, season 2 would be like bottom tier, original would be top tier obviously, and then season 3 I would give a solid B+. It would have been an A if it wasn't for the last 3 episodes. You know, nothing can ever be perfect, can it? I guess that's just a little too much to ask for. I felt like I was in my own world watching episodes 1 through 7. I was so in shock, first of all. I was not expecting much from this season, but it was a little too good to be true because then everything just came crashing down again and I was like, well, here we are. Even then, I will say, those 3 episodes where things got a little rocky, we'll talk about it obviously, are better than the entirety of season 2. So that's saying a lot. Enough of my rambling though. Today we're going to be doing another tier list for Clone High, this time covering season 3, and it's just going to be my review. I just find it easier to talk about the episodes and give each one their own individual time when I do it in a tier list. So without further ado, let's get right into it. But first... Ow. Why does my face feel naked now? I had that on for like a whole hour straight. Starting off strong, season 3 opens with a shot of Cleopatra making out. We are so back. Episode 1 is titled Blinded with Pseudoscience, Magnetic Distractions, and the school year has just started again at Clone High, and the question that was immediately on my mind was, what grade are they even in at this point? I thought I had it, and then the death maze happened, and now I'm just like, what? Anyway, the clones get introduced to their new science teacher in this episode, Professor Hirsute, who is hired by Candide, who is now the sole member of the Board of Shadowy Figures since the rest of the board was murdered. Now, as I was watching this episode, and if you watch animation, you'll know the exact feeling I'm talking about of like, oh god, this voice sounds familiar. Who the hell is this? The whole time I was watching this episode, it was like on the tip of my tongue and it was like boggling my mind. Well, it turns out Professor Hirsute is voiced by Paul F. Tompkins, aka Mr. Peanut Butter. Every time I hear,
Mr. Peanut Butter's house, who's that dog? Mr. Peanut Butter.
I get like flashbacks because for a whole year or 2 straight, I had that as my like alarm ringtone in the morning and oh boy, it gets the job done. But this character of Mr. Hirsute was honestly so much fun. I loved his time on screen. I loved the plot of this episode. It was truly such a strong start to this season. If you think back to the first episode of season 2, there is truly such an improvement here. The gag with Professor Hirsute though is that Scudworth, who's supposed to be like the science teacher substitute, immediately hates him. But of course he's like so laid back and chill that the students adore Professor Hirsute. Specifically in regards to the plot, JFK, Confucius, and Abe really like this guy. Well, all the students except for Harriet and Toussaint, that is, who suspect something is wrong here, and they go to Scudworth for help. So the 3 of them come up with a plan to steal Professor Hirsute's satchel, which he is particularly attached to for good reason. I mean, well, it's not a good reason. The man is a fraud and a murderer, and this information comes to light once Harriet and Toussaint steal the satchel from him in the middle of the night. Something else happens here though, which is a huge plot. Harriet starts to like fall in love with Toussaint and they have eye sex with their eyes, love at first sight. She eye cheats on Confucius with Toussaint. Meanwhile, while this whole plot is happening with our main clones, Joan is actually an outcast. For obvious reasons, this shouldn't be a surprise, and has to resort to befriending within the shadows of the Bleachers, aka the Bleacher creatures.
My name is Topher. I am an ally. Nobody likes me. I do not know why.
Now, the Bleacher Creatures group includes Topher, who's the leader, Ivan the Terrible, Jackie the Ripper, Lizzie Borden, Van Gogh, and Vlad the Impaler. Personally, I didn't have like a big attachment to this group of characters. They were funny, I liked their moments, but I was a huge fan of Jackie the Ripper, and I hope we get more of her. She was by far my favorite. But yeah, overall a very great start to the season, a super solid episode. I love how it kind of establishes some of the main plots of the season going forward and stuff, and I think for that, I'm gonna rate it at a solid B. I think that's a good ranking. I don't really have any issues with it. It's just not like one of my favorite episodes. But moving on though to episode 2, titled You Don't Get It, Sports Are Huge in This Town, which by far might be my favorite episode out of the entirety of the reboot in general. I just feel like this episode especially was a huge improvement and really reminiscent of the original Clone High, but let me know what you think in the comments and if you agree. Episode 2 opens up with a bit of backstory on the most popular sport of all time, snorkeling. Basically, in the game of snorkeling, you have to point out as many fish as you can, and as thousands of high school athletes dove into pools to compete, there was one champion that rose above them all: Cinnamon J. Scudworth. But all this fame and stardom came crumbling down tragically when Scudworth decided to eat without waiting 30 minutes before going swimming. And he wasn't just at any meet, he was in Big USA to compete in the Ultimate Championship. And in present day, Clone High's very own snorkeling team, who Scudworth is the coach of, is, well, awful.
We tried. Yeah, we tried.
However, in an attempt to recapture his glory from, well, his glory days in the snorkeling world, Scudworth decides to recruit Frida to the team, which is because he rolled around in some glass and then Frida was like, oh, like, you don't look well, you have this many shards of glass in you, and she was able to count all of the shards. So he's like, whoa, like, that skill might work with snorkeling because that's like the whole point of the sport. However, Frida is very hesitant to join. She wants to focus on her painting, which she submitted to the Exclamation Fine Arts Festival, and winning that could get her into a very good art college. However, Scudworth convinces her to join after she showed him her Cleo paintings, which one of those Cleo paintings she actually entered into that art festival. However, Scudworth says that snorkeling is a better choice because snorkeling could make her rich and then she could buy Cleo things that she actually enjoys. Ouch, but it actually works. And Frida is like a champion when it comes to the sport, like goes all the way to the championships just like Scudworth did all those years ago. And Cleo is very pleased with like the way Frida is able to spoil her with all her cash winnings. However, the both of them realize that like they've been neglecting what Frida really wants in this situation. So instead of competing in the championships, Scudworth finally tells her that the art expo actually did call. Initially, he didn't tell her because he was more focused on the fact that she was gonna reclaim the thing he didn't get to win, you know, her going to the very same championships where he screwed everything up. And then the other half of this episode follows Joan on her journey with the Bleacher Creatures, when the Bleacher Creatures find out the cheer squad is short one teammate and they want to use Joan to sabotage them to trigger another Cheermageddon, which was this event that happened years ago. A cheerleader held up a like letter sign wrong. It was like upside down, and this very mistake ruined the whole trajectory of the rest of her life from that point on. However, in the end, she can't get herself to go through with it because deep down she still cares about Harriet, and I mean this really goes for all her friends. They won't forgive her, which speaking of, that changes in this episode. Harriet actually does forgive her and they become secret friends. I am gonna rank this episode an S. As I said, this is by far my favorite episode in the reboot thus far. Both plots of this episode were very entertaining and had funny jokes and like really kept my attention. Also, I will say, even though John Dark was one of my favorite moments in the original Clone High, it's very nice to see that like we can have a girl on an otherwise all guys sports team without it being an issue. And speaking of that, my favorite part of this episode really had to be at the end where we see Scudworth once again at the same like trophy case stand that has like all the trophies from Clone High sports or whatever. And instead of being able to put a snorkeling trophy in there where there was, you know, nothing, he actually puts Frida's painting because she says she painted something to help her calm down before the snorkeling match, and it was a painting of Scudworth. Just really sweet. Dare I say I shed a tear. Moving on though, you know how I said that episode 2 was very reminiscent to the original Clone High? Well, even though that episode is still my favorite, episode 3 might be the closest to the original overall in my opinion. This episode follows Scudworth as he's trying to convert the school into a religious school to avoid paying taxes because he wants to save to buy Cloney Island. And he achieves this with the help of Cleo and Frida, who end up eavesdropping on his whole plan, which in their defense, he narrates out loud with his office door open.
Wait, you're turning Clone High into a religious school?
Gah! Mr. B, you've got to close this door when we're scheming.
At the same time, JFK is having an identity crisis when it comes to sex and partying. It just isn't fulfilling for him anymore. So when he finds out about the whole like prayer pals thing, which Scudworth added to the school to sell the fact that like, oh, we're a religious school, JFK ends up using Christianity to fill that void. Now at this very same time, JFK and Abe have grown super close as friends and are celebrating their 6-month boyniversary. And one of the best parts of this season to me was their friendship, or dare I say, more than? For crying out loud, JFK says he'll have sex with Abe. But that's just me getting ahead of myself. We'll circle back.
I've made mistakes. I've created disease and wars and the phrase, let's circle back.
This episode brings me to one of my biggest complaints about this season. Where was the original music? Last season was very musical, which makes sense because the original was very musical, but this season was really lacking in the music department. They already did this in the past 2 seasons, but especially in this season, they ended up using a lot of Abandoned Pools music instead from Humanistic, although it wasn't just Humanistic, which I did love, I can't lie. One thing about me is this show really got me hooked on Abandoned Pools. Pre-Save Aliens coming out March 1st and Stream Haunted House out March 25th. I've actually already listened to the new album because I did the Indiegogo campaign, which means you got early access to it, and genuinely so fucking good. Like, I need to put you guys on. Give Abandoned Pools a chance. But why I bring this up now is because the only original song we did get this season was like the Christian rock one in episode 3.
Dear God, I'm certainly able.
Anyway, JFK ends up getting a purity ring by the end of the episode because he got so swept up by prayer pals and religion that he forgot about his boyniversary with Abe. So Abe protests him getting committed to this purity ring because it's clearly cutting in between their friendship.
I wonder why Abe didn't come to prayer pals today.
Any second.
I actually felt really sad for Abe in this episode because he makes a huge speech during this kind of protest that he's already lost Gandhi, who literally disappeared, and Joan when she tried to kill everyone. He just doesn't want to lose JFK too, who's changing right before his eyes. Following this, we get this really intense scene of JFK being put in the position to choose between Abe or celibacy because apparently Abe represents the old JFK. They've been friends for 6 months. How does he? So JFK, he gets really overwhelmed and he decides to go to the chapel, aka the gym that they've transformed into like a church, and Abe follows him and then pretends to be God. But then he ends up telling JFK to just choose purity because he just wants his best friend to be happy. But God, no pun intended, this scene made me emotional. Like, I just love JF Abe. And yes, their ship name is canon, by the way.
I even had Van Gogh come to paint our JFK portrait.
Oh, and then Harriet, this whole episode is also like committed to religion kind of because she thinks that it will solve like the guilt she has for having eyes for someone else while she was in a relationship with Confucius. But when JFK comes like storming out of the gym saying, oh my gosh, God is here and he's saying some great stuff, Harriet is like, damn, this is my chance. Like, I need to go confess this and get it off my chest so I never have to tell Confucius. So she does. She confesses her sins of eye cheating to Abe, who she thinks is God because of what JFK said, except for Confucius followed her to give her a very specific I've only got eyes for you t-shirt, but he instead hears the whole thing of Harriet eye cheating on him with Tucson. I'm really stuck on whether I should rank this episode a high A tier or an S. I mean, I definitely like this episode more than episode 1, but at the same time, I don't know if it's on the same level as episode 2 for me, so I think to be safe, I'm gonna go with a high A tier. I just really liked the dynamic of JFK and Abe in this episode, the kind of angst we get with their relationship. Oh, and I didn't mention the name of this episode. It's Bible Humpers, a much-needed Praycation. On to episode 4, though, titled Principal, sub to Zero, sub to Hero. Basically, Joan and Abe get put in charge as principal and vice principal of the day when Candide is gonna be, like, gone all day, so Scudworth and Mr. B decide to go and get free burritos because it's like free burrito day, and they do this in an effort to save money to buy Cloney Island so they can like use the burritos for school lunches, I'm thinking. So they needed someone to manage the school and just like picked at random. Joan, however, ends up throwing a party in an effort to redeem herself to her ex-friends, which does work in the end. Abe originally objected to doing this because of the consequences, which could get them thrown into clone juvie. At the same time this is all happening at the party, Confucius is convinced after a pep talk from his friends that like he needs to outman Tucson in order to win Harriet back, who no matter how much she denies it is obviously attracted to Tucson. Now this party was not only a genius move for Joan because of the fact that it worked for, you know, getting her ex-friends to kind of give her another chance, but it also worked for the Bleacher Creatures as well, who never get invited to social events. But that doesn't last long because she ends up locking them in a closet because Cleo said they shouldn't be here.
This, my friends, is the VIP room.
Seriously? I have never been in VIP room before.
And honestly, she wasn't wrong, because the second the bleacher creatures get released, or they realize like, hey, this isn't a secret VIP lounge, she just locked us in a closet. They release these snakes out to the party, and then it kind of like gets out of control, especially because Confucius has a bear named Kevin, which he brought because
Stone comes from a rock, paper covers rock. Paper makes cuts. Cut the cheese. Cheesy bread. Bread is made from dough. Dough is a deer. A female deer. Ray is a drop of golden sun. Son of a bitch. Bitches are snitches who get stitches. A stitch in time saves 9. Work at 9 to 5. I never have to work because my parents are rich, which makes me rich.
To put a long story short, Kevin starts attacking everyone because he got bitten by a snake that the bleacher creatures released at the party. But everything does have a purpose, and this episode ends with Confucius maintaining Kevin, but also realizing he shouldn't have had to go through all of this to get Harriet's attention anyways. Oh, and also, he's ripped. Like, I mean, jacked. Under that, like, very, very baggy, I was, like, looking for the word, very baggy sweater that he always wears. He's, like, literally jacked. And it's truly the plot twist of the century. No one saw that coming. I don't really have a problem with this episode, but it's definitely not one to me that, like, really stands out. Although I did really like the development when it came to Confucius, because I think it was important he had that realization and realized that like, hey, like I'm worth more than this. I shouldn't have to do this for my girlfriend. She should just like be attracted to me, and she's clearly not. And we'll see more of how this kind of plays out in the next couple of episodes when it comes to Confucius and Harriet. But I think this episode is a solid B, but it's like behind episode 1. Back to Confucius though and his development as a character. Episode 5, titled Money Can Buy Me Love, Stupid as Cupid Does. I am dying to talk about this one. Oh my gosh, okay. Basically the plot follows Joan as she learns her film, which we had no idea she was working on, got accepted at the Wes Anderson Sin Making Fellowship in Prague, which is a film festival. All she has to do now is somehow get the money to pay the $2,000 fee, and as we know, Confucius is rich, and Valentine's Day is coming up, and they're having a Valentine's Day dance. However, he just broke up with Harriet, who has already moved on to Tucson, which they pretty much started dating right after they broke up. So when he runs into Joan, they decide, hey, let's make a deal. I'm rich and I will pay for your film fellowship if you can help me make my ex-girlfriend jealous by pretending you're dating me in a fake relationship. However, after working so hard to make it seem convincing when they realize like they're clearly gonna have to put a lot of work into this, the pair actually end up falling in love for real. See, they end up signing a contract about this deal they're making, and Joan put it in her like boots, but the DJ ends up reading it out loud to everyone because it fell out when they took off their shoes to go and dance, because Joan was like, I can't dance with these shoes on. At the same time, Harriet realized that, hey, me and Tucson are actually too much alike, to the point where they keep repeating everything like they say to each other verbatim. So when the DJ reads off this contract and she realizes what was going on, she actually goes back to Confucius, but at that point he's all confused and he just runs off to find Joan. In the end, he does confess to Joan that he actually does have feelings for her now, and he feels all confused because he got what he wanted, but it's not what he wants anymore.
Joan, my acting like I liked you turned real. And now I'm all confused because I got what I wanted, but I don't think I want it anymore.
And Joan also confesses that she also fell for him. So the episode ends with the two of them sharing their first kiss as fireworks set off, and while Rehearsed by Abandoned Pools plays in the background. This might be crazy for me to say, I fucking love this ship. I will admit, seeing them in the trailer had me shocked, and I was initially like kind of against it. I was like, this ship doesn't make any sense. But once I got the context and I saw them bonding, I just realized how like perfect these two nerds are for each other and like how much they really have in common. And dare I say, you know, all that hype there was for Joan FK, well, Joan and Confucius deserve that very same hype in my opinion. But I really hope to see this ship stick around for the foreseeable future. I would love to see your guys' thoughts in the comments. We'll
circle back
to this at the end, obviously, because we're, you know, the finale. I can't talk about it now. I'm getting ahead of myself already. Oh yeah, speaking of Harriet too, I just want to say her outfit in this episode for the Valentine's Day dance is literally so good. Like, I feel like for Joan, they just put her in a dress, and Confucius is obviously just wearing a suit. But Harriet's hair and outfit and the coordination, oh, it's so good. One thing about me, you could never get me to hate Harriet. She is overhated. But you know what also happens in this episode? Basically, Scudworth gets a date for the Valentine's Day dance with someone named S. Kunk. It's Skunky Poo. There's no
S. Kunk? That's an unusual name.
We literally get a scene of Candide and Mr. B being like, you're fucking stupid. And it's so true, because how does he keep falling for this? And it happens a second time, and he's like, you know, you need help, Skunky Poo. And Skunky Poo stops and gets emotional, and she's like, I do need help. And so Skunky Poo does get help. Literally, Scudworth takes Skunky Poo to rehab.
Thank you, Scudworth. I really do want to change.
If you told me a year ago that this is where the show is going, And then towards the end of the episode, there's a scene where Skunky Poo returns with her notarized certificate saying that she completed the rehab program. And Scudworth has this like flash forward to the future scene where he's imagining a life with Skunky Poo. He's imagining getting a little freaky with Skunky Poo, and they have a baby, which Mr. B judges him for. Thank you, Mr. B. You said what we were all thinking. Partly traumatizing, extremely hilarious. The introduction of Skunky Poo was great. I really like this character. Like, I'm sorry, I just find it really comical. Oh, and also there's like some random girl that shows up to Clone High in this episode, and no one's ever like seen her or talked to her before. But most confusing of all, no one seems to know what clone she is. But judging by the fact that her name is Mary, no one really bats an eye because of how many Marys there are in history. But I won't lie to you, when I saw like this character's design in the trailer, I was convinced she had to be someone's like self-insert OC or something. But anyway, she gets with Abe in this episode officially, so he has a girlfriend now. I feel like this episode as a whole isn't really anything special, but because it brought about this ship and I really like the development of it, I'm going to rank it in S tier. This is the episode I've gone back to the most when I was like rewatching season 3. I've watched this episode like 5 times. I can't stop. Like, I just love them. Look at them, guys. Next is episode 6, Go Yell It on Snow Mountain, Snow Way Out, which has 2 major plot points. 1, Joan and Confucius need to tell Harriet they are together, and 2, Mini Cleo and Frida conflict. Oh, and then JFK sent Abe's girlfriend a dick pic too because he was having a midlife crisis now that he's searching for a banging good time and there's no banging to be found. Anyway, just like I think it was episode 7 of last season, the clones go away on a trip, only this time it's to Avalanche Point in the mountains. As much as I said that I loved Confucius and Joan, I'm not really one for the whole like, oh yes, we have information that we need to tell somebody, but neither of us wants to tell the person, so we just stall for a ridiculously long time trope. At the same time, it's definitely weird because Confucius never technically got back together with Harriet.
Just so you know, Harriet and I didn't actually get back together.
What?
She kissed him and then he ran off in a nervous panic after she mentioned wanting to get back together. So I was really glad to see Cleo actually call her out as much as I love Harriet.
Honestly, Harriet, you don't have anything to be mad about anyway.
Excuse me?
Joan didn't steal Confucius from you. You guys broke up because I cheated on him with Toussaint, remember? Then you ended things with Toussaint because you thought Confucius was available, and it turns out he wasn't.
She is the one who took her partner for granted and had to suffer the consequences when he realized he was worth so much more than that. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but I could have sworn Harriet and Confucius broke up during the Death Maze episode, the finale of last season. I know they did in the beginning. I don't really remember them getting back together in the episode. I haven't watched it recently, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was really confused to see them back together suddenly making out in episode 1. Not that I minded too much because I really did find them cute as a couple last season, but after seeing how Confucius was treated in this season, I just think that this was best for both of them. I like the development of Joan and Confucius a lot better too because we actually didn't get to see that with Harriet and Confucius because of the whole like fake social media account thing, because basically Harriet discovered, she was like, oh, I think this is Confucius and he likes me, and that was how they got together. It was nice to see like both Joan and Confucius have that vulnerability, and I guess it just made them realize how much they actually had in common, as well as the viewer, because like I was confused when I saw them in the trailer. I was like, what the fuck is going on with this show? I can't take it anymore. None of this is to say, by the way, that they didn't need to clear the air to Harriet. In the bus going up to Avalanche Point, she says they got back together at the perfect time, and he stalls again. I can't lie though, my favorite scene of this episode has to be when they're on the ski lift, and then we get those intense shots of those signs that are very specific to their situation.
That was close.
As soon as we get off this thing, we're doing it.
Absolutely.
And then they just decide to like not get off the ski lift. It was fucking taking me out. That was hilarious.
Where are you going?
We messed up!
See you back there.
But on to the Calipatra side of things. This episode really made my heart break for Frida. I fucking love Cleo, that should be obvious, but the way she acted in this episode was just really bringing us back to her roots in season 1. I feel like in a relationship, even if something isn't your thing, you should at least make an effort for your partner. However, when Frida is excited to ski and even got them matching sweaters, she wants nothing to do with either. Also, you will never catch me calling them Cleta. So instead of realizing, hey, me and my partner haven't spent any time on this trip together, why is that? She comes to the conclusion that they have nothing in common and aren't compatible. Going on to tell Frida later in the episode that they haven't spent time together because Frida's the one that likes doing lame stuff.
We haven't spent 2 seconds with each other since we've been here.
And that's my fault?
I mean, yeah. You're the one who likes doing lame stuff.
My stuff is not lame!
Luckily, they came to a good compromise in the end, and this didn't necessarily ruin my enjoyment of this episode. It's actually really great that they aren't limiting couple disagreements to their straight couples. However, telling your partner you'd rather freeze to death than wear a sweater that she got you? Really?
Why didn't you put on that nice warm jacket Frida got you?
Ew, I would actually rather freeze to death.
Those are my thoughts on that for now, though. I don't want to get ahead of myself because we will get back into it when we talk about how things panned out in episode 8. Oh, and I also loved the side plot of Mr. B turning evil and then trying to kill everyone when they got trapped in the cabin. Or let me rephrase that. He didn't try. He was somewhat successful.
Well, we're missing several students. That's the last time I let you chaperone.
I'm stuck between ranking this one a high B tier or a low A. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go with a high B. I think that's solid. Not me actively contemplating, like I'm sorry, I'm very indecisive. And if I did this exact tier list a year later, I guarantee my entire list would like shift. Anyway, moving on to episode 7, Grave Mistakes, The Virgin Homicides. Okay, now I know I haven't talked too much about the whole like Mary and Abe plot, frankly, because
I don't really care.
The lunch scene in this episode of them making out is genuinely the most disgusting thing I've ever seen.
She's definitely not as manic and pixie-like as we thought.
But what I do care about is the plot twist this plot takes in this episode. It really made me value this character a lot more in my rewatch. Basically, this episode starts off with Mary and Abe as the other clones start to realize there's a lot of red flags about Mary. Specifically, Joan gets concerned when Mary cuts Abe off from Joan and doesn't allow them to be friends anymore. And when Joan is concerned about this, her friends initially write this off as Joan still being in love with Abe, which really fucking pissed me off because she's quite literally in a relationship with Confucius, and this just feels like the writer's weak attempt to once again bring Joan Abe back from the dead.
Let it die!
We don't want it! This isn't the only time they do this too. Like, basically from this point on, it keeps happening, her friends keep doing this. But Joan does bring up a good point that they don't know, like, who she's cloned from.
And who is she cloned from? She's never even said her last name, and there's like a million Marys from history.
That's a good point.
Interesting. I don't know any Marys from history.
So that's when the clones are like, okay, let's ask Scudworth, he's gonna know. And they make all these like educated guesses, and he's like, very funny, that would have been clever, but he said that he never cloned a Mary. In fact, Scudworth hasn't made any new clones since episode 12.
So, okay, obviously I meant 2012 here, but I just want to say, I don't know what it is about this script and my dyslexia, but for some reason, I was reading everything wrong, so I really apologize. I would say in advance, but you've probably already witnessed it.
That's like the side plot of this episode, is him trying to make a new clone, only he's a lot older now and the job is more difficult for him. Back to Mary though, the clones go to her house and we end up finding out the plot twist of the century. Another
circle back
moment, if you will. Remember episode 2 of season 2 when Joan, Frida, and Harriet had a sleepover? That's right, Mary is the Bloody Mary, the one they summoned at the sleepover and escaped the mirror at the end of like that musical number, Sleepover Baby. I have to say, I was not expecting this at all, but I love that the answer of like who Mary was kind of like right in front of our faces all along. Also, I love how Cleo finally points out the fact that she wasn't invited.
So, just to clarify, am I invited to this?
And I swear it took like so long to integrate Cleo into the like cast as a regular character. Like the first 3 episodes of season 2, she just kind of disappeared and it was really weird. Even in like the Twister musical episode last season, she's a background dancer. She's resorted to that with a bunch of like side characters, even though she's supposed to be one of the main clones. In the end, the only way to force a stubborn Bloody Mary back into her mirror is by saying her name 6,069 times. So they go to the cemetery where she planned to have sex with Abe to stop her, but he really just seems pissed that he's still gonna be a virgin. Oh, and also JFK offers to have sex with him. The closet is glass.
So I'm not having sex with anybody then? My offer's still good, pal, if that helps.
And well, I'm gonna have to rank this one another A too. Honestly, very solid season up until this point. Episode 8, Cyranos, a Portmant-opus. I don't think I said that right. You know, I was pleasantly surprised by this season. It was genuinely solid, and I was laughing out loud, and my favorite characters were being somewhat restored from the last season. And then, episode 8 happened. Episode 8, Words Cannot Explain. I will just let the videos I took that night do the job instead.
How about some froyo when it...
Can't believe. I can't.
I'm sorry,
I
sweetheart.
can't.
I'm the one who lied to everybody. I guess I got what I deserve.
I can't.
No one deserves to have their heart broken
No.
like that.
This was such a good season. I can't believe I just... I'm just gonna... What? Episode 8 follows Principal Scudworth, who bought an island on eBay to make his Cloney Island dreams come true. However, he still needs to get the money for it. So because parent-teacher conferences are happening today, he's gonna ask all the parents to donate to the school, but he's really gonna use like that money for the Cloney Island fund. And one of these parents he's gonna be meeting with is Frida's dad, who we first think, wow, this guy's so wholesome. He loves Frida so much. But the more he's on screen, the more you want to slap the shit out of him. Basically, he doesn't like Clone High. He sees the school and he decides to start researching other schools for Frida to go to instead because this isn't the right learning environment for her. So her dad suggests inviting Cleo over for dinner so maybe she can make a case for Frida continuing to attend Clone High. He's actually never met Cleo. Understandably so, this puts a lot of intense pressure on Frida for Cleo to make a good first impression on her dad. So she gets Harriet, who's started her own marketing scheme, to help her do an under makeover of Cleo so her dad will like her. That's what Cyranos is.
Cyranos, bitch!
So this make under sequence actually got us a makeover reference. I literally screamed. Did the joy last for long? No. Was it worth it? Yeah. Ultimately though, this plan crumbles, and I'm gonna tell you exactly why. Earlier in the episode, when Frida's dad is at the school, he is judgmental as fuck. Something we learn in season 1 is Cleo's mom is an alcoholic, though it's played out to be a joke and not taken on a serious level. So of course, it's parent-teacher conference day and she's having to deal with her alcoholic parent at school who's not listening to her because she's absolutely wasted. But you know what Frida's dad says when he's like witnessing this? It's shameful how that girl is speaking to her mother.
Are you joking?
Just shameful how she's speaking to her mother.
And you know what Frida did when her dad asked who that girl was? She said she didn't even know her.
Who's that girl?
Good question. I've never seen her before.
So during dinner with Frida's dad, he brings up this story about some disrespectful girl at her school and how she was wearing too much makeup and not enough clothing and had too much attitude. So just overall shaming Cleo and then going on to shame her situation. So when her response is bringing up her mother's alcoholism and how she has to deal with it, he doesn't even acknowledge it. I know this show is not meant to be taken on a serious level. I get it, it's satire. But as someone who's had an alcoholic parent, this episode just made me really feel for Cleo, and I really like moments in this show where they give things a little more depth. And it truly irks me that this man couldn't even acknowledge her situation. So Cleo then reveals herself and defends herself, as she should.
I see. Frida didn't mention this.
She was probably trying to put it out of her mind.
Did Frida mention the girl probably had to put up with an alcoholic mom who embarrasses her everywhere they go?
And his only response is, after she storms out, someone's gonna need to put $2 in the swear jar for that.
And I'm so done with this shit.
Well, someone needs to put $2 in the swear jar for that.
Do you have no empathy for other people? But things couldn't possibly get worse. Oh, trust me. You'd be surprised. They do. So Frida runs after Cleo to apologize, and it's a super sweet moment where she acknowledges how she royally fucked up. However, it turns out the whole time, Harriet was also coaching her to say everything in that apology. I don't have words. Just why would you do that? And just like that, my worst fears were confirmed. Cleo and Frida broke up. Besides that, the other plot of this episode is Joan and JFK pretending to be Confucius's parents, since they're never around because they're rich. But the parent-teacher conferences this time around are mandatory because Scudworth needs the money. But when JFK gets hurt from a booby trap, no pun intended, the pun was actually that Confucius is always home alone. Abe ends up filling in for JFK, and Joan and Abe just end up arguing the entire time during this parent-teacher meeting until his real parents actually show up, but they look eerily similar to Joan and Abe. They also end up giving Scudworth the funds that he needs to actually officially buy Cloney Island from that eBay auction. Looking back at it now, this episode really isn't that bad compared to 9 and 10, and I think that's mostly because I actually do really like the side plot of this episode, but I think I'm still gonna rank it a C just because that Calopatra plot. I could see why, if you didn't care about this ship, you would like this episode and rank it higher on a tier list than I did, but I just think because of that, I'm gonna rank it a C. We've reached episode 9, Cloney Island Twist. I'm not gonna lie, when I rewatched this episode and episode 10, it was like I was rewatching this for the first time because I spaced out so much, specifically watching episode 9. From being so distraught about the Calipatra breakup.
I'm like so unnormal about this right now that I'm not even like paying attention to this episode. I can't like fathom. Let me just tell you, I'm totally tuning out this episode right now. I could not tell you what is happening. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on.
Episode 9 is not really important, so I am going to keep this short to focus on the finale. Basically, the whole episode is the clones reading Scudworth's diary because nobody has seen him since Confucius's parents gave him all the money, and Harriet wants to get to the bottom of what he's up to because she has a feeling. Shortly after this, the clones realize he's using the money for Cloney Island, and they kind of discover what Cloney Island is in the process of this episode. But we also get a bunch of Scudworth lore, like the fact that he based Cloney Island off a history theme park called Yesterland, which he was never allowed to actually go to. His parents would just use him as bait to scam people out of their money. Well, that was until they died in a tragic accident that Scudworth absolutely had nothing to do with, where he found out the theme park was actually nothing like he thought it was going to be, so he determined to build a better one with actual historical figures instead of animatronics. However, it goes deeper than this. They give Scudworth a love interest, only she's a female version of him, and there's even like a British female version of Mr. B, which they give an intense backstory. They were madly in love, but he thought that she left him when it turns out she was trying to surprise him with Cloney Island. But then she got stranded there. But yeah, this episode is absolutely filler, kind of opposite of last season where episode 9 was genuinely the best episode of the season. Like, I think I said earlier that even the worst episodes of this season are better than season 2. I always forget about episode 9 when it comes to season 2 because genuinely it was on another level. So I'm never talking about episode 9, which was Mr. B's backstory in season 2. But yeah, this episode is absolutely filler, so I am gonna rank it like a C. However, the ending is important. Throughout this episode, they are basically reading the diary. Abe keeps pointing out, hey, there's a leak, but no one's listening to him. Well, it turns out the whole time they weren't really in Clone High, but they were in a submarine heading to Cloney Island, and the diary itself was actually just bait because he knew the clones wouldn't be able to resist reading it. Also, this shitty filler story made Frida and Cleo like realize hating each other wasn't doing anyone any good because they don't want to end up like that in 30 years, so they're friends again. And with that, we've reached the finale, the Cloniest place on Earth, Missile While You Work.
We're wasting time. This missile could be here in as little as 30 minutes.
What is even going on?
6 hours and 30 minutes. Fingers crossed.
What is this? I don't understand.
The finale opens up with a commercial for Cloney Island, revealing the theme park to the viewers, but also soon after this we get the clones' reaction to the real deal. How to explain this episode? It's their final attempt to cram Joan Abe into the season. Like, they really nail it to the ground. Like, it's actively being shoved down our throats. We also get big hints at potential endgames, like they hint towards JFK and Harriet actually having a thing again, and Cleo and Frida, which I strongly believe are going to just get back together in season 4 if there is a season 4. So that was a relief. But you know what isn't? The huge drift they put between Joan and Confucius, who are supposed to be dating. In the last episode, they were actually arguing quite a bit over Joan not wanting to accept money from Confucius's parents, because in her opinion, it felt like she was being paid to be his girlfriend, which I feel like is a valid point, and she doesn't really need the money. She even declined the money when they actually officially got together. She was like, no, like, I don't need the money anymore. It doesn't matter for the film festival. But yeah, we're here. Wow, Cloney Island. But it's Scudworth, and we know he can't just have his way for once, right? Remember Candide? Well, you should, because unpopular opinion, she's actually hilarious, and if you're mad about losing Cleo's original voice actor, we still get Krista Miller with Candide. Anyways, Candide finds out that he stole the entire school and built Cloney Island. So she sends a missile to the island, or I mean her like pet lizard does, and then she's like, oh, you little shit, you're so great.
My foster daughter. Oh, you naughty little shit. Looks like it's time to cancel Clone High again.
But her main point in doing this is because it's going to interfere with Operation Spread Eagle, which is apparently still happening. So she calls Joan to let her know, and you're probably like, how? Scudworth took all their phones. Well, Candide, she put a phone inside of Joan's arm. Inside her arm. Imagine how uncomfortable that would be, and I'm just kind of confused how she didn't notice sooner. Anyway, she lets Joan know about the missile, so she has to scramble to save all her fellow clones before it destroys the island. Once Joan alerts all of the main clones, they devise a plan to get Confucius because he's the most far away on top of the island for his attraction. So they split up with Harriet, JFK, Joan, and Abe heading or cutting through Villain Village to get Confucius, and Cleo and Frida going to the submarine. And when Joan finally reaches Sage Summit, which by the way this whole time Confucius has been stressed out whether Joan even likes him. God, I'm just not over it. It sucks that Confucius like chose this relationship because he realized his worth just for the same thing to be potentially happening again. Why couldn't they just let them be happy? Damn, let Joan die. By this point though, 15 minutes have passed and everyone is flooding to the submarine to escape, and it turns out that Abe is passed out on the beach from eating a horse tranquilized churro that Scudworth made in an attempt to like put the clones back to work, but none of them ate them. The weirdest thing about this to me was just the fact that his friends didn't even notice he had like disappeared. So Joan runs off to save Abe, even though the missile is literally right there, and Confucius ends up following her at first reluctantly because he's scared that he could be making the wrong choice and that Joan might actually like Abe. Ultimately, he does decide to stay after he gets hit by one of like the gift shop mugs that has a quote from the real Confucius on it: "To see the future, look to the past." And with this, he remembers, you know, the girl he fell in love with, and he takes the risk to stay with her and not just save himself. And the episode ends with Abe, who's like waking up from his slumber, and well, I'm just gonna let this scene speak for itself.
Abe! I love...
Even though I am gonna rank this episode low, I think I'm gonna also do it a low C. It's really hard. I feel like I could do it lower than that, but also I do really like the whole Cloney Island thing. I thought that that was really funny. The only part of this episode that makes me not like it is the fact that like Joan Abe is being crammed down our throats, and we have Confucius who's like, does my girlfriend even like me? And I just feel really bad for him. And once again, we have that thing with like all of the main clones being like, oh, Joan, we all know you like him, even though she literally has a boyfriend. The cliffhanger of this episode really gives off, like, it's really reminiscent of, like, how the original left us. And the fact that there's a chance we'll never know what happens if this show doesn't get renewed for a season 4, it's, definitely fun. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the new Clone High season. I really urge you guys to watch, because remember, if we all band together and watch the new Clone High, we can get Gandhi back in season 4. But let me know how you guys feel in the comments about this season. I definitely like this season better than the last, and it was really good to see that they actually improved, though there were some things I definitely wasn't a fan of either. And with that, I will see you guys in my very next video.
A crown of thorns, some rosaries, loaves and fish down on my knees, on every wall.